So we are starting. I'm just gonna wait a couple of minutes so that we'll actually see if we're going live or not, just to have the confirmation. Last week I went live. We talked about this topic, but it was in Spanish. So in the case you're more comfortable in Spanish, you can go back to my feed and you will find actually the exact same event, but it's in Spanish. I normally don't do that, but I felt like doing it. But we are talking about exactly the same topic. So yeah, now actually receiving the information that we are live. Actually, if you are there listening, you can actually let me know if you're listening to me, if the audio is okay, just to have this confirmation. I hope so. So let's just start. I'm reading my mobile just to see the comments because I can't see the comments here properly, just in case you see me checking stuff, all right? So for those that don't know me, I'm Claudia Spolaor, and the founder of Quantum Performance and Kupi Hub, so which is an app. We're going to talk about this at the end. Today I want to talk about something that happens in every elite club, but that actually almost no one is working on systematically. So I just want to ask you a very direct question. If you are there and you want to answer me, you can do it in the comments. Otherwise, it will be just for you to take some, to bring some awareness. So, do you have any player in the team who in training is the best, physically is at 100%, tactically sharp, totally prepared, and yet in the match that matters the most, they're simply not the same person? Have you experienced that? It's not a lack of talent and it's not a lack of effort. It's not that they don't want to win. Every athlete has the hunger to win. So, what I'm going to talk about today has nothing to do with hunger. It has to do with something that happens in the athlete's nervous system. And that in most clubs is only addressed once the problem has already appeared superficially and often too late. And so, if you what happens if you work on this topic and you work more deeply, it can save you time, it can save you money, it can save you energy, and above all, the most important thing for me is that it brings sport to a completely different level. um, so when a player makes let's say a critical error, or faces maximum pressure, a playoff or their first weekend on the top division or in the world championship, let's say, yeah, the brain doesn't just lose focus. The nervous system automatically enters in what we actually call protection mode. So it's in the protection mode is an acute stress response, and it happens in milliseconds, and it's completely automatic. The player doesn't choose it. The player can't control it, can't stop it through their willpower. It just happens. And so this is a biological state that triggers things immediately. Things such like, for example, decision making shuts down, and the player can access the tactical flexibility they've been training before for months, maybe. The brain in protection mode doesn't process the same way. The second thing that it triggers is muscle tension that increases. So that dramatically raises the risk of overload injuries. And it's not a coincidence that certain players get injured during the most demanding periods of the season. It's not just about the body, but it's also about how they react emotionally to the conditions. Now, the third thing that can be triggered is emotional inconsistency, frustration, anxiety, reactivity, and the player who after an error simply can't come back to the present moment. That's the player that got triggered, that got into protection mode. All right. Now, here there's something. I'm just checking if anybody's no comments, but so let's say that there's something very important that I want you to understand, and is when does these happen? When does the protection mode activate? When the player feels, and this is extremely important, that losing means something very dangerous. So that if they fail, they don't belong. That if they don't perform, they'll be dropped. That their value as a person depends on the result. Now, when the brain perceives that as a threat, protection mode activates automatically without the player being able to do anything about it. So the problem isn't that they lack the hunger to win. The problem is that they're afraid of what losing means. So that doesn't get solved with more motivation. It gets solved by training something completely different. It's like, let's say that having a highly talented player in protection mode is like having a Ferrari with the handbrake on. So because of the external pressure, the motivation, the push, they have to win, that actually activates protection mode even more. So it can work in the short term, but it's not sustainable. It's like putting more gas into a Ferrari with a handbrake on. What is going to happen? So because on the inside, the player is still the same, with the program wiring in that losing is a threat. Because of that, it's just not sustainable. Yeah. And the program sooner or later comes back to collect. The body never lies. Now, just checking the comments. Okay. Any questions? I'm here. All right. So, here I want to tell you something that as sporting directors, as coaches, you might need to hear. Some of you know it already. Maybe I'm not bringing anything new, but maybe sometimes what happens is that you kind of consciously know it, but then because of your own fears as a coach, as a sport director, you kind of lose and you go to the opposite side, right? We want to win, we're scared to lose oftentimes, right? And then we start to lead from that fear. And that's when we take another way, and without realizing it, we actually get into things worse, right? If you've been there before, you know what I mean. If you don't, no problem. So when you ask your players how they are before an important match, I'm going to tell you this: the ones that are not doing well, that deep down, that deeply scared of failing, of those, the 80-90% will lie to you. Yeah. They won't tell you they're afraid of losing. They won't tell you they're blocked on the inside. They won't tell you the pressure is crushing them. Why? It's very simple. Think about it. In elite sport, performance is trained, technique is trained, physical conditioning, tactics, everything is trained. But athletes are not socially allowed to be vulnerable. And this is nobody's fault. I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the way it is. Collectively, I'm not judging coaches or anybody. It's just how we collectively see athletes. We love them because they're powerful, right? Because they're very able. So what happens? They feel they're loved because they're able, because they're powerful. So they don't like the other side. They don't like to look at that. But we all experience both sides. We, or in some point in our lives, we all feel able and unable, right? So the more you're pushing what you don't like, you're pushing it away, the more you actually end up being that. Yeah. And it's because lives, the universe, whatever you want to call it, wants us to experience both and to grow in both situations, being able and being unable, and to be more and more and more, become more and more comfortable in the unableness. That's resilience, right? When things are not going the way we have to develop this resilience, and life brings you situation to develop that. Okay, but unfortunately, because of this collective conditioning, like for an athlete to admit and to show the vulnerable side, it's very difficult. Yeah, and so the thing is that, you know, athletes are not socially allowed to be vulnerable. But without vulnerability, there's no honesty. And without honesty, there's no real growth. So what wins is the character, is the mask. What the player wants the world to see. And the one who can handle everything, right? The one who's fine, who's not afraid. And you can see that, like, even in the interviews, press conferences, very few of them admit they're going through stress, or the pressure is affecting them. But that is just, you know, I can handle it, I'm fine, it's nothing. But on the inside, they're broken oftentimes. Yeah. So, and that mask has a brutal cost for them and for you, for coaches, for sports director, because the energy the player spends maintaining that character is energy that doesn't go into performance. So it costs you time, it costs you money, energy, and above all, this is, for me, is crucial. Sport loses its deeper purpose, which should be a vehicle for growth for everyone, right? So when we start to look at players just as numbers, and yes, we have to make money, we have to win, we have, you know, all these sponsorships and all this type of system and industry, which is cool, but we need to bring the players back to the center and focus on that, because that's, I think, like, if we work with sports, most of us, it's because there's a passion inside, there's a right there's more than just making money. And so sports is an amazing vehicle for growth, right? And we need to, I think, bring the players back to the center of the discussion, right? So obviously it's hard, because the more expectations there are outside, the more they're expected to perform at their best, and the more there's pressure. Yes, but remember also the, like, pressure is never something that happens outside, it's how we deal with that. Okay, and it depends on how strong, how confident we feel inside. Yeah, and this has to do with this type of work. So I'm going to give you something that something very concrete that you can actually use with your athletes. So don't ask the players how they are. That question has a trap, because the socially acceptable answer is fine. Yeah, the player already knows what's expected of them. So instead of you can ask them, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much energy do you have to compete today? Yeah, it's a little bit different. And then this is the important part. Don't just take the number, watch how they say it. Do they look you in the eye, or they look away? Do they answer quickly, or they hesitate? Does the number they give you match with their body, with what their body is saying? You know, because the verbal language can be controlled, of course, but the body, as I've said before, never lies. So a player who tells you 8, but has the shoulders down and their jaw tight, and that player is not an 8. Yeah. So what happens when you realize that? You compose and repeat 8. And see what happens. If they start to justify themselves, you really know it's not an 8. Okay. And if you want to go one step further, you can ask them, what would you need to be a 10? So that second question is where the math breaks. To answer, the player has to acknowledge that there's something missing. And that acknowledgement, however small, is the first step toward real honesty and towards a change eventually. So you don't, it's just, this is just how you can little by little tap into your players and see what is actually happening. Now, I want to share something that probably will change the way you understand athlete performance. And when we talk about improving performance under pressure, almost everyone's instinct or everyone's answer is the same: more motivation, more hunger, more desire to win. Yeah. Let me check the comments. No comments now? All right. Any comments? I'm here, all right? So, as I said, think about the player who's in the top division, who got there. They have hunger. They have desire to win. Hunger is not what's missing. What's missing is something completely different. We need to train the athlete not to win, but to be strong in the face of loss. What does it mean to be strong in the face of loss? It means that when the player fails, when they lose, when they underperform, their value as a person doesn't collapse. Now, it means that the error doesn't trigger the survival alarm. That losing doesn't mean not belonging. That fail doesn't mean the world is ending. Yeah. So when a player reaches that site, something extraordinary happens. They dare more because they're no longer afraid of the consequences of the error. They feel freer because their value doesn't depend on results. They perform more because all their energy goes into the game and not into protecting themselves. Yeah. So here there's a paradox that very few people understand. The player who is most free in the face of loss is the one who wins the most, or at least has a more joyful journey, which should be the purpose of everyone, not just athletes. Yes, having a more enjoyable journey in this experience called life, right? The player who is not free from the fear of loss will inevitably go through ups and downs, and then we call it fate, but it's not fate. Everything is created inside. Everything is a response to our nervous system programs, all right? Now, because they play without fear, because they dare, because they're present in the match, not managing the fear of failing, because of that, the performance is way better. There's more creativity, there's more space. So external motivation, you have to win, we can win, can work in short term. I'm not saying that it won't, but in a long term, it activates protection mode even more. Yeah, I'm kind of missing some words. So because it reminds the player that there's something very dangerous about losing. Yeah. Now, what releases the protection mode is not more pressure, is taking away the error's power to threaten. Yeah. So having said that, now I'm going to explain how that actually happens, at least, because it doesn't happen by telling the player the error doesn't matter, you're okay. That doesn't work. Yeah, that just works on a conscious level, and the conscious mind only creates the 5% of your thoughts and emotions. If you don't work on the subconscious, if you haven't done any work, yeah. And the program that's weird, that's actually wired, I would say, not weird. That's why it doesn't live. It just doesn't live at a conscious level. Everything is created on a subconscious level, and that's the 95% of everything we experience. So the nervous system doesn't respond to reality. The nervous system and the subconscious and our emotions, they respond to how we perceive reality, to our interpretation of reality. And that perception is conditioned by everything we've lived through. So by past experiences, by beliefs, patterns, weird like patterns that are deeply that lie deeply in our system, yeah, over years. So let me give you a concrete example. We have a player who spent the entire career in the second division. They never played in the top flight, you know, and the nervous system associate that scenario with something dangerous because they've never experienced it as something safe. So this is, for example, something new, but it also depends on how they, like, if you're very deeply conditioned on not having to disappoint anyone, that's going to be extremely dangerous. Your system is going to perceive that as extremely dangerous because you can perceive a risk of disappointing others, for example. Yeah, but everyone is different, of course. Now, so what happens there? Losing there means not belonging. And for human beings, evolutionary, losing belonging to the group is a survival threat. So it's not a metaphor, it's biology. Yeah. So how do you change that kind of program? Because the mind responds to that. So by bringing the athlete to a specific state, this is what I do, and what we do with QP Hub. So that specific state is a state where the brain waves slow down. That's what is called theta state, and the state between, let's say, waking and sleep. So the same state in which children learn, yeah, where the brain is completely open and receptive. That's why kids are such sponges, right? So in that state, we do two things. One is that we train the player to experience that situation before it happens in reality, and we associate it with safety, calm, belonging. The brain doesn't distinguish between living it for real or living in, you know, or experiencing in that deep state. It records it in the same way. Yeah. So there's no difference for the brain between, you know, living an experience or just imagining it and feeling it. There's literally, like, there has been, we have so many researches in this topic. Yeah. Now, the second thing what we do, we go and change the information at the root, because often the fear of loss doesn't come just from the last match. It comes from much further back. So we're not afraid to say this, that sometimes there is a wounded child inside the elite player. Yeah, and all of us also. But a child who learned that failing meant not being loved, not being enough, not belonging. So this is what is happening. And that child is still there. And that child sometimes takes control of the game. And it activates exactly in the moments of maximum pressure. Yeah. So changing that program, helping the body understand that its value doesn't depend on the result, that's what sets the player free. that's what makes them strong in the face of loss. Yeah. So that is what makes them truly perform when the match matters. Now, confidence isn't just built by telling the player to be confident. That works on a 5%, right? It's built by training the nervous system to associate that situation with safety, with belonging, with freedom. So this is exactly what we do with the app I've created, Kupi Hub. Kupi Hub is a mobile app designed to train the automatic response of the athlete's nervous system through guided session, 15, 20-minute session. And we don't really teach the player what to think. You have plenty of specialists that do that. We don't give them techniques to apply consciously on the field. What we do is bring them into this amazing theta state, that state of maximum receptivity, and work on the internal programs that condition their automatic response under pressure. So, any questions so far? You can let me know in the comments. Let me see if I can see any comments here. For the moment, we don't have. All right. So having said that, we literally train them to be strong in the face of loss. So their value doesn't depend on the result. So that the error doesn't trigger the survival mode, the survival alarm. And when that happens, the player dares, they free themselves, and they truly perform. So this is something that the player does in the downtime. For example, on the bus, in the hotel after training, or on their phone, without disrupting anything in the coaching staff routine. So it's an automatic training. We work the subconscious response, what happens in milliseconds in the field. There's no friction. The player does it alone and whenever they want and wherever they are. So there's zero interference with the technical stuff. And there are also data that we collect for the club. So internal metrics on consistency under pressure, sleep quality, and the speed of mental recovery post error. So they kind of do a self-evaluation. And the preseason is an excellent moment to install this before the real pressure begins, so that by September we're already putting out fires. And I also want to be honest about something. Kupi Hub is not a crisis intervention. If a player has been completely blocked for months and needs deep individual work, that requires something more specific and personalized that we can do with very quick techniques that gives us amazing results. But Kupi Hub, that what actually does, it's something different, and it's much more valuable on a long term, on a long run, training the players so they don't enter in protection mode in the first place. So preventing it before it happens. And if you think about it in terms of real cost to the club, when a player enters in protection mode, they can stay there for weeks, months, losing matches, losing confidence, losing value, injuries. So what does that cost to the club in results, in investment, in league position? If you're training that player to avoid going there, that can make the difference between a season that works and one that doesn't. Now, this is what I wanted to share with you today. No questions for the moment, still all good. So the most important thing that I wanted to share is that every athlete has the hunger to win. What makes difference is something else, training the player to be strong in the face of loss, to play free, to truly dare, and enjoy. And if you're a sporting director or a coach and something I've said connects with something you're seeing in your team, send me a DM this week. Not to sell you anything, but at least to listen to you and see if it makes sense to talk 10 minutes. And if you're an athlete, something I've said connects with you, something I've said can actually reminds you about something you experience in competition, you can reach out. I also have solutions for you. And in that sense, for clubs, I have a space for 3 clubs this week before in the next weeks before the preseason starts. So thank you for being here. And any questions, please DM. I see there are some people connected. No comments. All good. All right. So having said that, wish you an amazing week. And let's stay in touch. All right. Bye bye.